All right. I am Dylan McDowell, CEO of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, or NCEL. We're so grateful you've joined us today to hear a snapshot of environmental policy trends across the states and to learn about our year-round resources that empower our nonpartisan network of legislative champions to protect, conserve, and improve the natural and human environment. This is something we've started doing in recent years and hope you've seen this before and will join in the future as well. Please make use of the Q&A box for any questions you have. We'll move through our presentations first, recording the presentation portion only, and then we'll open it up for questions from our partner network. But first, a little bit about NCEL. We are a nationwide network of about 1,300 state lawmakers that provide trusted, nonpartisan support to states as they take on an increasingly central role in environmental policy. I think you'll hear that again and again today that we see states as where a lot of the action is happening right now and are so excited to be working in this space alongside many of you. We were created by and for state lawmakers and engage our network through national and regional forums, experiential learning, and more. And I'll dive into that in a moment. Our team divides our work up across four main program areas. Today, you'll hear from our staff on a number of topics, including data centers, climate accountability, insurance, habitat connectivity, outdoor education, zero waste, and more. So I look forward to going through all of that. But first, we are going to talk a little bit about the overall context of states and what we're seeing in this moment. This past year, we've witnessed unmatched resilience and leadership across our network. We have seen federal action stall, but we've seen states stay focused on advancing lasting solutions for their community and the environment. This last year and that commitment, it's fueled a year of meaningful growth at NCEL and some really profound actions at the state level. We've learned a few things along the way. We've seen state leadership is more important than ever. We recognize state lawmakers are under-resourced. So many have part-time lawmakers or part-time legislatures, limited staff, limited pay as they try and navigate these solutions. And states are now entering shorter legislative sessions as they kick off 2026. Four states don't meet at all: Montana, Nevada, North Dakota, and Texas. Others, like my home state of Oregon, are going into a 35-day short session or in the midst of it right now. So there's limited time and limited capacity. And that's where NCEL helps states fill these gaps. We serve as a trusted resource for lawmakers across the country, and we help legislators with bill tracking and events like this, where we can highlight what's happening, what are those trends, and where are states leading the way. In addition to this webinar, we're going to be publishing an accompanying blog that highlights emerging trends. We'll be sharing that link fairly soon and hope that you'll give that a read. To talk a little bit more about NCEL and our role in the ecosystem, I'm excited to introduce one of our board members, former Michigan State Representative Abraham Ayash. I will turn it over to you, Representative.
Thank you, Dylan, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in for this exciting webinar. I will tell you that when I sort of came across NCEL by accident and then fell in love on purpose, and this is an organization that has really, for me, expanded and sort of exposed how critically important having surgical analysis on state policy and recognizing best practices to get as much stuff done. As Dylan mentioned, when you're in the state legislature, you are competing against two things: a federal government that is always in chaos and a timeline that is often truncated because of the lack of resources or structural schedules that are locked in place with respect to lawmaking. So having organizations like NCEL has been super, super helpful. And I will tell you an example for myself when I served in the Michigan legislature. For years, we were talking about an issue around how to deal with extended producer responsibility. What do we do with the life cycle of a product when we're finally finished with it, beyond just throwing it into a landfill? And it's a pretty complicated issue. There are a lot of stakeholders, there are a lot of people, there's a lot of companies, there's a lot of investors and folks in the industry that want to either keep the status quo or make some benefit that they can continue to make money in some convoluted and sometimes unfortunate ways. Having NCEL navigate that particular policy for me was a lifesaver. I was able to call other legislators who had passed similar policies in other states and talk them through what were the corporations that were involved in that particular policy, talking about what were the lobbyists' strike points on certain legislation, and how and what was most effective to actually move the policy down the finish line. Because I will tell you that Whether you're in Minnesota, you're in Michigan, you're in Montana, industry tends to congregate and move in very similar fashion. They will hire the government affairs people that work in one state to advance an issue in another state. So having NCEL and the network of legislators, which I think was most powerful, to be able to say, hey, pick up the phone and you call a state rep or a state senator or a delegate or an assembly member from another state. Walk me through how the process went. Tell me what your leadership did. Tell me what your policy teams said was or wasn't possible. What was the pushback from the governor, from the department heads? What stakeholders came to you and said, this is bad, this is good, here's what we're willing to settle on? It allowed me to fast track the process, understand what were the issues that were possible to get done, and then be ready for any of the pushback that I wanted to come forward and push back on. And this is one example of many issues. When I think about siting, there are plenty of states that have reached out to me around large scale renewable siting uh, because we passed it here in Michigan. Them calling me and saying, hey, we heard about the work that you did through the legislature. We learned about you from NCEL. It really builds a camaraderie of folks that recognize that state policy is going to be the front line for so much of the things that we do, especially with the volatility of national politics and the constant shifting of power, which we anticipate will be something that continues for the next several cycles. So having that resource, having that network is incredibly important. And then since joining the board, I will tell you that there are things that I've learned about and had exposure to and allowed me to think more deeply about these emerging issues. Things like AI, recognizing the power and the value and the concerns around data centers, figuring out the opportunities for conservation of our water, learning more about how we can look at waste management across our states. All of these issues become way easier when you have issue experts, when you have people, when you have the resources, and most importantly, the network to allow us to connect and have that conversation. So I am incredibly grateful to have joined NCEL. I think the network of staff have been incredibly helpful. I'll give you one final example, and then I'll pass it back to Dylan. You know, we were able to visit and have an entire conference around uh, utilities and learning about all the intricacies of what is the grid? How do you write policies based on the grid, understanding transmission lines, and so on and so forth. The amount of legislators that walked into that meeting, attended that weekend seminar, and then left saying, "Holy mackerel! I had no idea that these things were the way they were," was incredibly helpful because now we at least have a platform and a baseline for so many legislators to talk about transmission lines and more energy deployment, things of that nature. There's no other organization that would have done that in a place that is as neutral and honest as possible. Oftentimes, you have organizations that will bring these type of issues and conferences and convenings, but they're generally shifted towards one perspective of the industry, one perspective of a stakeholder. What I found valuable is NCL tries to bring as many sides as possible and sort of share the argument in its totality to allow people to have that perspective. So welcome to NCEL. I hope you guys will continue to engage with us. We do have our national forum, and I don't know if I can plug this right now, Dylan. I'm sorry if I'm
Go for
jumping the
it.
gun, but it'll be in Chicago this year. I unfortunately will not attend because my primary election is about 6 days after that national forum. But when you think about all the ways to sort of get that first exposure, what value comes with the national forum? That is what sort of brainwashed me when I came up. I think my first NCL was in Indianapolis. In Indianapolis, like this is incredible. The amount of legislators that are aligned in terms of interest and passion, and just be able to learn from them is super valuable, especially for a state that has term limits. And this is my final point. I'm sorry, I know I said this was my final point. Michigan has term limits. We have 12 years of total time we can serve in the legislature. To be able to talk to a state representative from Oregon who served 25 years and really got to build a breadth of expertise on an issue and understand how you actually got it done, that was super helpful. So if you are a state that has term limits or you're a state that has one party rule, or you're a state that has government that is extremely limited in when they actually are in session, the best way to maximize your time on particular issues regarding environment, sustainability, and energy, sitting with the experts and the network at NCL is going to be super, super valuable for you. So with that, I will finally pass it back to you, Dylan. I'm sorry.
No need to apologize. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Representative, for your leadership in the legislature and on the board as well. I'll just take a minute to go over some offerings we have across the organization, ones you can find today on our website, and then I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful program folks to talk through some of the trends in our strategic plan and other elements. First, I'll mention our bill tracking map. This is something where we track, last year we tracked about 3,000 policies across the country. We have our map live right now on our website, and we are tracking all kinds of things moving across the country. You can go interact, search by states and regions and topics, and figure out what it is you're looking for to learn what states are doing. So look for that being updated every Monday morning as session continues. Let's go to the next slide. We also have a searchable resource center, and this is where we try and make our information very digestible for very busy state lawmakers, but also those in the field that are working on these issues and wondering what have states done? What are some of those good examples? Our next slide has a few examples of some of the policies and resources we highlight. We have briefing books and issue briefs. These are more in-depth resources that talk about case studies and provide more policy examples and give a larger overview of a topic. We also have fact sheets and policy options. These are more bite-sized for, we say, for a busy state lawmaker walking to a committee to understand an issue, to understand some of the solutions that are out there. We have blogs and policy updates. We use these to highlight NCEL events, but also really innovative policies that have been enacted or introduced to show what's trending across the country. And then finally, we use webinars. We use these in a variety of ways to help lawmakers highlight their own policies, cultivate that peer-to-peer learning, and create spaces for lawmakers to ask questions for their peers, but also public webinars like this to highlight and share out to the rest of the field. And then we have a few different types of events. We have state visits where we go to state capitals and meet with lawmakers in their home state. Our team is currently spreading out across the country and meeting with folks one-on-one. We have the National Forum that Representative Ayash just highlighted. In July, we will be in Chicago. We had nearly 200 lawmakers last year gather to learn from their peers, learn from experts, and really come up with innovative solutions for environmental problems. We do issue-specific and regional educational events. These are opportunities to get out into the field, to see solutions firsthand for blue economy, electrification, plastics innovation, to really understand, or plastic, I should say, circular economy innovation, and opportunities to see these solutions and then talk with your peers about how you can bring those ideas back to your states. And then finally, a lot of network engagement opportunities. We have sign-on letters. We have opportunities for lawmakers through an environmental leadership accelerator, a state lead program, working groups, and more. So we are so excited for all the lawmakers here. We hope you will consider joining these opportunities. For folks that are not in the legislature, we hope these enrich and add to the work you're doing, and that we can work with you to share out resources and also highlight tools and expertise you bring to the field. With that, I'm going to turn it over to NCEL's Chief Program Officer, Ana Mascareñas, to talk a little bit more about our strategic plan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Ana Mascareñas, and I joined NCEL last summer, just as this 4-year strategic plan was coming into final stages, which really sealed the deal for me as the place to be. I started my own policy work at Environmental Health and Social Justice nonprofit, and followed by government appointments in state environmental protection and federal health and human services. Last year and continuing into this year, when we've seen the core of our democracy and federalism being shaken, it's roadmaps like this one and the people behind them that help us meet the urgency of our time with clarity, ambition, and action. So NCEL's strategic plan is designed to reflect our central commitment to empowering state legislators as environmental champions. We are focused on expanding our reach and deepening partnerships to empower lawmakers with tools for bold, lasting environmental progress, and have these 5 core strategies for impact. First, by cultivating state environmental champions, we are growing our dynamic and engaged membership, expanding the number of bipartisan champions, and providing targeted opportunities for multi-state collaboration to replicate and to scale legislator success. Next, by catalyzing policy innovations, we are supporting policy innovation by fostering strategic collaboration between legislators, subject matter experts, tribal nations, and local communities to create new, locally relevant policy design. Next, by upholding environmental protections, we are deepening our work with legislators, helping them find opportunities to fill cuts to state budgets that are resulting from federal actions and push back against rollbacks to regulations that impact states. By utilizing the full power of state legislators, we are also helping legislators across the country discover, understand, and utilize innovative and effective ways to make change possible through a broad variety of paths available. And lastly, by fostering trusted partnerships, we're expanding our reach and depth of engagement with key stakeholder audiences, providing trusted data, insights, guidance, tools, and expertise. Next slide, please. Each of these focus areas are, of course, supported by key objectives and tracking results. For example, with this third goal of upholding environmental protections, here are just a few examples of how we're closely connecting our federal engagement strategies. Last year, we educated our network on how states are filling the federal climate gap and led 7 nationwide sign-on letters with more than 500 signatories to uphold federal protections, from protecting endangered species to pushing back against expanded offshore drilling. And just this past week, we published a resource on our website about what the federal administration's repeal of the endangerment finding means for states. And it emphasizes that while EPA erased its own authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, its decision is not taking away states' authorities to act, and states can still advance policies to reduce emissions. Next slide, please. There are 3 elements we're calling on as we implement these strategies. First, our 30-year commitment to state environmental progress really sets us up for success in driving durable state policies in the years ahead. Second, with holistic, justice-centered approaches, we aim to connect issues like housing, health, and economic development to further empower lawmakers to lead with strong intersectional solutions. And third, we are investing for collective impact by prioritizing network building, communications, staff development, and experiential learning to build that robust community of legislators who drive national progress. Next slide. Thank you. And one more example is our upcoming launch of a new legislator working group on resilient communities and environmental justice. This is in partnership with the Sustain Our Future Foundation and We Act for Environmental Justice. We're launching a new working group this spring. The overall initiative will advance bold, practical, and locally grounded climate and sustainability solutions, and will provide lawmakers with an opportunity to learn and collaborate towards reducing environmental injustices, building resilience at the neighborhood, regional, and state levels. And you'll hear from Navjot Kaur a bit earlier, and you can contact her to learn more. And next slide. We divide our work across these 4 program areas: climate, energy, conservation, environmental health, and ocean. And each of the managers you'll hear from in just a moment guides the daily work of these programs. Next slide, please. And here's our full NCEL team. You may have already seen some of them in your state capital this year, or you may soon, and also providing a number of virtual learning opportunities. Each will share their outlook of emerging policy trends popping up across state legislators so far, and how to get in touch with the program managers you'll hear from and their team members for more information. So I will turn it over to our team of program managers who each bring their expertise, their networks, and incredible commitment every day to leading. Ava Gallo, Kate Burgess, Navjot Kaur, and Alyssa Wyman. I'll hand it over to Ava first. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Ava Gallo, and I am the Climate and Energy Manager here at NCEL. We are mainly focused on, especially this session, looking at these 3 program focuses: transitioning to a clean energy economy and building out the infrastructure that is needed to do so, modernizing the financial system to better account for climate risks, and creating a clean and connected transportation system. And so on the next slide, during this session, we're seeing a common thread of how we can continue to decarbonize the economy while still prioritizing affordability. And so data centers have been the #1 topic of discussion for both how legislators can protect the average ratepayer from paying for the grid upgrades that are initiated by these new data centers, and also how to ensure that data centers are using clean energy most efficiently. So states across the political spectrum are investigating ways to ensure that data centers don't harm their constituents. And secondly, another way to insulate households from rising energy costs is to increase accessibility and affordability of rooftop solar. Nearly 80% of US residential solar expenses come from soft costs like permitting and inspection processes. So states are looking at ways to streamline permitting by standardizing processes across localities and eradicating barriers to plug-in solar, which is a technology that requires no contractor oversight and accessibility for solar on folks that do not have control over their rooftop. Lastly, legislators are looking for ways to fill budgetary gaps by holding polluters accountable for past damages, otherwise known as climate superfund bills, which were passed initially in Vermont and New York, and seeing lots of different states this session take that on as well. And insurance affordability is also key here, and states across the country are looking to require insurance companies to be transparent about how they calculate disaster risk and give households discounts for upgrades made to reduce that risk. So it's a session focused on affordability across various sectors, and states are trying tactics across the board to reduce the burden on their constituents. So we will see how that all shakes out. And with that, I'm going to pass over to our conservation manager, Kate Burgess.
Thanks, Ava. Good morrow, everybody. My name is Kate, and I'm the Conservation Program Manager. And in this program, we envision a future where land, water, wildlife, and people flourish together. So we do this by empowering our legislator members to understand and protect, restore, and sustain nature in our relationships with the living world, bringing benefits to current and future generations of land, water, wildlife, and people. And so this includes, as you'll see on the screen, a particular emphasis on also supporting states in repairing and strengthening their relationships with tribal nations as well. Next slide, please. And so even in short sessions, we're seeing states leading on solutions that center land, water, wildlife, and people. And in 2026, state leadership is particularly evident across 3 conservation issue areas of habitat connectivity, protecting endangered species, and expanding outdoor recreation. So first, for habitat connectivity, as development pressures are growing, wildlife habitats are becoming increasingly fragmented. With that, continued federal challenges to land protections, housing shortages, they're all compounding these pressures and really dividing ecosystems and creating safety risks both for wildlife and people. However, projects that reconnect habitat fragmented by these development pressures often pay for themselves quickly and costs save for emergency and medical assistance, property damage, and the value of animals lost. Continuing the trend of 12 states having enacted bills in 2025 on the topic, we're seeing the same number of bills this year already in 2026 that have introduced legislation to address this issue. Next is endangered species. With 1/3 of US wildlife at risk of extinction, compounded with new federal rollbacks that threaten long-standing protections under the Federal Endangered Species Act, state legislators are really stepping up as the frontline defenders of our nation's wildlife, flora and fauna in 2026. And so because these proposed federal ESA rollbacks at the federal level have generated broad bipartisan concern from state lawmakers, we're seeing that response in a really big way in terms of state policies. So this year, 8 states have introduced substantive legislation to strengthen protections for endangered species because they are the last line of defense for the wildlife and species in their state. Lastly is outdoor education. States are increasingly recognizing that outdoor education is a really powerful tool for building resilience in children and fostering early positive engagement with nature. And so in addition to the many benefits of getting more youth outside, research increasingly shows that outdoor learning can specifically boost academic outcomes, childhood health, and connections to heritage. And so in 2025, we saw state policies to expand outdoor access and education at some of the highest introduction and passage rates of any environmental topic, often with very strong bipartisan support. And that momentum is carrying right into 2026 as lawmakers pursue legislation to expand outdoor education opportunities through, for example, the establishment of statewide programs, pilot initiatives, and curriculum pathways that recognize the value of outdoor education for kids. And so 18 states have introduced legislation this year to expand outdoor education opportunities and programs for our next generation of leaders. With that, I will pass it to my colleague Navjot to talk about environmental health.
Thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about the Environmental Health Program today. The Environmental Health Program examines the human and environmental relationships through policies and programmings that reduce chemical and environmental exposures in air, water, soil, food, and more, and with a heavy emphasis on environmental justice. So our main focuses are, as I mentioned, environmental justice and cumulative impacts, plastic pollution and zero waste, talking about the entire life cycle of plastics, toxic chemicals, as we've heard about PFAS, flame retardants, and phthalates. And finally, we do sustainable agriculture and water quality, which includes flood resilience, soil health, and nutrient pollution. Next slide, please. So in recent years, we've been seeing these emerging trends happening in the environmental health program when we track legislation. So recent years, we're seeing there's a key focus on addressing plastic pollution and advancing zero waste solutions. Plastic production is rampant, but the US currently recycles only 5% of the plastics. And many states are now trying to take approaches with extended producer responsibility, also known as EPR, deposit return systems, also known as DRS, and single-use plastic bans to reduce litter and improve recycling rates. To prevent plastics from entering the waste stream altogether, we've seen around 26 states and territories introduce legislation, and New Jersey actually passed the most robust bill. And reduction, we're also seeing with reductions in federal support with healthy waterways combined with intensifying weather events that is causing aquatic pollution, such as dead zones. And so states are trying to shift towards doing some watershed initiatives on their own. We're seeing legislation to tackle nutrient pollution and increase flood resiliency. And especially flood resiliency is important as a proactive measure to prevent states reducing their impacts on the people and the infrastructure when extreme weather strikes. And so we're seeing 11 states so far introducing legislation like this. And finally, we have seen and heard about PFAS so much. It is called the forever chemical. It has become a major legislative priority for a lot of states, and there's so much research coming out on their hazardous impacts on water, soil, and public health. These persistent chemicals are found in a wider range of everyday items that present severe health risks, such as cancer and other developmental issues. And we've seen 22 states introduce legislation. And now I will kick it off to Alyssa, our Oceans Program Manager.
Thanks, Navjot. Hi, everyone. I'm taking us home with a topic that covers 70% of the Earth's surface, the ocean. Even if you're not coastal, you probably care about the ocean in some way, shape, or form. So, our ocean program's vision is to equip policymakers with the tools needed to advance sustainable solutions that protect the ocean, marine life, and promote resilient coastal communities. So our focus areas run the gambit: offshore energy, very hot topic right now, be it offshore wind, expanded oil and gas infrastructure decommissioning, and increasingly interest in tidal and wave energy. We also spend a lot of time on coastal resilience and restoration, things like protecting our coasts from sea level rise, nature-based solutions, and more. We also do work on the blue economy, which encompasses industries that are reliant on the sustainable use of the ocean and its resources, including aquaculture, working waterfronts, fisheries, tourism. And then we also are working more and more now on fisheries and aquaculture. If we can go to the next slide. So the trends we're seeing, what's the hot topic right now? Nature-based solutions are a big one. So as we see our coastal communities seeing threats with sea level rise, coastal erosion, or even overdevelopment, we're seeing states focus more and more on the protection and restoration of these ecosystems. So 9 states and territories have introduced legislation protecting coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass, salt marshes, etc., as well as prioritizing living shorelines. Also, the blue economy, really exciting. We're seeing more and more legislation supporting a sustainable blue economy, balancing again this economic growth with protecting oceans and the coasts. So, what this has looked like is standing up blue economy task forces in states like Oregon and Hawaii, studying the feasibility of different initiatives like tidal and wave energy, or establishing workforce development programs in the marine sector. And then finally, fisheries and aquaculture. So, fisheries is a huge focus for coastal states, and I'm sure all of us who enjoy consuming seafood. But we've seen 8 coastal states introduce fisheries management legislation that target regional priorities, with the most attention right now being on seafood monitoring and labeling. There's also been 32 bills introduced related to aquaculture, which aligns with it being a emerging sector in the US and requiring management and permitting. And there's also a strong overlap with this trend and legislative attention on shellfish, which is a prominent and high value form of aquaculture. So that's kind of what our ocean program's looking at right now. But if you have anything you want us to look more into, let us know. And with that, I will kick it back to Dylan McDowell.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, and thank you to all the program managers for not only tracking and presenting, but just all of the work you're doing on the ground, and to the full NCEL team and all the folks working on these policy areas.